Hello, hello. Welcome back to Wedding Wednesday. My name is Adriana, and today's episode, I'm sharing with you a wedding planning update that is quite juicy because we've made quite some headway with wedding planning. I'm also going to share with you some tips on how to avoid hating your wedding photos. This is really key. And lastly, I'm going to share a listener story today on the messiest wedding she's ever been to. Before we dive into our episode, I'm going to ask you to please subscribe, rate, review, and comment if you have any questions. It really does help our podcast grow, and we appreciate all of the support that we get. With that, let's dive into our wedding planning update. Welcome to Wedding Wednesday, the podcast that's about to spill all the tea on what it's like to plan a wedding from the bride's perspective and all the details no one talks about. I'm creating the podcast I need to keep me sane and feeling less alone as I plan my own wedding. We're diving deep into the hilarious, messy, and sometimes crazy world of wedding planning and wedding horror stories. Get ready to laugh, cry, and maybe feel a little less alone in this wedding planning madness. So, wedding planning update. We have the church booked, which is so exciting. I was really getting nervous with booking of the church because it was taking us some time to find a church that we A, liked, B, accommodated all of our criteria, and C, that was on the way to the venue. So we were trying to find a church that was not too far off of the route of the venue, just because when you ask your guests to kind of drive around the city, it can become difficult and hard for them to do so. So we were really stuck on finding a church that, would accommodate a lot of our guests for that reason. And of course, when we were shopping for the right church, some of the criteria that we were looking at that we were finding hard to find were the following. So number one, we wanted to have AC in the church. The church that we chose does not have AC, but we had a runner-up church, if you will, that didn't have fans either. So that was actually something that we were looking at pretty closely. So although the church that we booked doesn't have AC, it does have fans, and they do open the windows all summer long to let the air circulate. So we've walked into the church when it's been summertime to feel what it's going to feel like on the day of our wedding. And fingers crossed that the combination of the windows being open and the fans being on will be enough to make sure that the guests don't get too hot during our ceremony. Something else that we really wanted was wheelchair accessibility. We have elderly guests coming to our wedding, and so we wanted to make sure that they would be able to have an alternative to walking up a lot of stairs and that it would be a safe place for them to come to. So that was really important to us as well. We were also looking for a hue in the church. Sounds so weird to think about, but a hue in the church that wasn't a color. So what do I mean by this? The church that we originally liked a lot had green lamps or lanterns, if you will, throughout the entire church. And when we would take an iPhone shot, you would see this green hue throughout the picture. Although this is really nitpicky, my fiance and I were talking about how we didn't want every single church picture that people are going to take on their phones to have this green hue, and that we would rather just find a church that had potentially lighting that was a bit brighter so that there wouldn't be this weird colored tint to our pictures. The next thing that we really wanted out of our church was actually a staircase. We really like pictures of weddings when all of the guests are around the newlywed couple and they're at the bottom of the stairs and all of the guests are dispersed throughout all of the staircase. We think it makes for a stunning picture, and we really wanted a picture like that. And so we were really adamant on finding a church that had a few stairs that our guests could kind of gather around for that picture after the ceremony. A lot of the churches that we did see were beautiful, but they didn't have that staircase that we were looking for. And when we noticed that when you don't have a staircase but you just have a platform, let's say just a flat floor, it can also make for a beautiful picture, but then it becomes harder for everybody to get in the picture and not get hidden, because everybody kind of ends up being almost the same height in that picture, if that makes sense. So for that reason, that was another one of our criteria that we were looking at when booking the church. Another criteria we were looking at was the possibility for a different priest to come do the ceremony than the priest from that church that we were booking. We have a priest in particular that we would like to marry us. And so that was really important to us that we could choose a church that would allow him to marry us there. And then lastly, out of all of our criteria, we were also looking to ensure that the pricing was reasonable. Obviously, most church pricing is reasonable. The church we happen to find happens to be extra reasonable, which is really cool. And a perk of this church is that it's also in a residential area. So the area itself is very green. It's very suburban. It's really pretty. And so it'll make for a nice experience when the guests not only drive up, but also when they come to take pictures, and also when we come to take pictures with our family after the ceremony. So that's a really long way to say we booked the church. We are working on booking the priest next, but hopefully we'll have an update on that by the next episode. The next thing that we secured pretty much 99% is all of the entertainment. So we're doing a few musical entertainments throughout the day, actually. So we have some music booked for the ceremony. We have music booked for the cocktail, and we have obviously music booked for the reception too, which is really cool. We're maybe looking to add one extra person depending on the music that we choose to like walk down the aisle to, but that's still up for discussion and not 100% confirmed just yet. In terms of like music entertainment though, those things are ticked off the list, and I'll happily put completed in my wedding spreadsheet. I will link the wedding spreadsheet in the description box below if you'd be interested in getting a full spreadsheet that's already done for you with every single task that you have to do. Because for me, it's been an absolute lifesaver, and it is literally single-handedly planning my wedding for me, if you will. It's like I took all of my brain, like all of the tasks out of my brain and onto that spreadsheet, and it's making everything so much easier for me. So check it out if that's of interest to you. But that's been really cool to click, completed, especially well before the timeline that it said that it should be done. So it's just one less thing to worry about. The next thing that is fully in progress is the wedding dress shopping. I've been now to, I want to say 4 stores. So I've tried quite a bit of different styles, lengths, cuts, all the things when it comes to dresses, and it's been really cool to narrow down my style. I'm noticing I have a very specific style, which I had a feeling I would have, but not only am I now hanging out more in a specific cut of dress, but I'm also noticing like the styles and the decorations on the dress are more and more kind of coming back as like a similar vibe that I'm liking, if that makes sense. So it's been really cool to just find my wedding dress style throughout this whole process. There's been one dress so far that I've had what the brides are calling the feeling, if you will, which has been so exciting. I still have some wedding dress stores that I'm going to go to and try on more dresses just to make sure 100% that, that dress that I felt great in really is the one for me. And that's just because I like to do my homework and my due diligence. And also I had booked these appointments before I found this dress that gave me this feeling. But let me tell you, the feeling of finding your dress, everybody told me that I would have it at some point. They said to wait. Oh, the brides I spoke to who are already married, who had this experience, they all said, wait for that feeling. Don't just settle for a dress that's just pretty. Wait to put on a dress that really feels like it's yours. And the best way that I could describe it, that I felt anyway, well, first of all, I was super skeptical that I would ever feel this, because after trying tons of dresses, like my mom and my sister and myself were all doubting that I was ever going to like be 100% satisfied. But no, it's definitely worth waiting for that feeling and not to settle, for one. For two, it almost feels euphoric, like you want to cry. Some cases you do cry. I held back tears when she put on the veil to complete the look. It like really just felt euphoric. It's the word that comes to mind when choosing your dress. It also felt like the dress almost chose me. It's the weirdest thing, but it's true what they say. If you're in the middle of wedding dress shopping and you've put on a lot of dresses and you're like, this is pretty, this is pretty, this is pretty, but you haven't felt a different feeling than just this is pretty, I urge you to hold off until you find that dress that makes you feel euphoric and like it chose you. It's really magical. I can't imagine another dress making me feel this way, honestly, even though I have a few other appointments to go to. But for the sake of doing my due diligence and my homework, I will go and I will just make sure 100% that like that was the right thing. Something also to keep in mind here is that I didn't pull the trigger once I had that feeling. I wanted to sleep on it. I wanted my dad to come see it. And I just wanted to put it on a second time to see whether or not I'm going to have that feeling again. So I booked a second appointment at that same store for a few weeks from now after I've tried on other dresses. And if I have that feeling again, I will pull the trigger. So it's really smart if you're the type of person who likes to sleep on decisions. Don't hesitate to do so. Even with this, the dress is not going anywhere. It's still going to be there. And as long as, you give yourself that time to do your homework and like sleep on it and come back and try it again, then, you'll know for a fact by the second time that it was the right one or it's not the right one. And then you'll keep the search going. But that's super exciting that I felt this feeling that everybody talks about, which is really cool that I was doubting that I would feel. I was really only doubting it because as a woman, I try things all the time that I think are really nice. My engagement party dress didn't give me a feeling. I just like really liked it. I did love the dress. I still love the dress, but it didn't give me this feeling. So I was kind of like wondering why the wedding dress would be different. And even till now, I don't know why that feeling is different when you try on such a important dress. But maybe that's exactly why it's different. It's because it is maybe the most important dress of your life. I don't know. But in any case, if you're going through it, I urge you to wait for that feeling. I also urge you to listen to your gut. One of the appointments I went to over the weekend was quite unpleasant. And I'm going to tell you why. So we walked into this appointment after I had that feeling at the first appointment, and I was still super open to trying on other dresses. We walked in, she signed us in, everything was good. And then we sat down. The appointment started at 4 p.m. because that's what I booked on their site and that's what was available. And so the dress shop owner sits down next to me and starts to ask me questions. What do you like? What don't you like? Do you have pictures? What do you feel like doing? But right before she sat me down, I went around the store and I pulled 3 dresses that I thought were nice that I wanted to try. There weren't really other dresses that spoke to me other than those 3. So I already had pulled them for her so it would make her work a little bit easier. As she was asking me these questions, though, she was kind of saying, like, I wasn't really giving her much because I didn't know what to say. Like, she was saying, like, what'd you like? I was kind of describing a little bit what I like, but, like, keeping it pretty vague. But to be honest, it's hard to describe exactly what you like because I liked a lot of different styles of dresses. So she goes, okay, pull up your phone, show me some styles. So I'm showing her different styles, and she goes, well, everything you're showing me is contradicting itself. And I said, I realized that, but like maybe I like different styles. Like, what's wrong with that? She goes, well, because you booked the 4 p.m. slot and we close at 5. So I'm trying to get through this appointment quickly and kind of like finish with your appointment so we can close at 5. As soon as she said that, I was really kind of turned off, to be honest with you. So that was my gut kind of telling me, like, if I don't feel comfortable in a wedding dress appointment, I don't want to continue this appointment. But because I was already there, my mom and my sister were there, I just calmly turned to the woman and said, I completely understand. That's fine. But I pulled 3 dresses that I'd like to try. Am I able to try those? She goes, yes, you can try those. And so off I went to try those. The second kind of like red flag, or I don't know if it's a red flag. Everybody who tried on dresses, tell me in the comments below how your experience was. But what I ended up doing was, you go in the dressing room and typically the store owner or somebody who works at the store helps you put them on because they're really hard to put on. In this store, they didn't help me put them on at all. They kind of just unzipped the back and like undid the dress so I can get into it myself, but they weren't willing to help me get in them. So getting in the dresses was quite a struggle, and I didn't want to particularly ask them to help me because maybe it wasn't in their policies to help me. I don't know. But I definitely thought that was strange considering the previous 4 stores I had been to all had helped me get into the dresses. So that was the second thing that I was like, ooh, that's kind of weird. The third thing was a comment she made when I stepped out of the dressing room and onto the little stage thingy that they have there and looked at myself in the mirror. So I was looking at myself in the mirror in this dress that seems to be her bestseller. She kind of said it was her bestseller. And I was kind of looking at it and I was like, I like it, but I'm not sure. And then I turned to my mom and I said, like, what do you think? And then my mom was kind of saying, I don't like it so much. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of this. I'm not a huge fan of that. And the store owner turned to my mom and said, well, whose dress is it? Is it yours or is it hers? And I was just very surprised that she said that to my mother. And so I said back to her, well, I'm not going to buy a dress that my mom doesn't like. And then she quickly course corrected and said, of course, totally fair. So all this to say is that when you're going dress shopping, these are the kind of like red flags to look out for if you don't feel right in that situation. I did not feel right from the moment she said, we close at 5, we're trying to rush you through your appointment, to kind of saying this comment to my mom, which was not appropriate for her to say. It didn't make me feel comfortable to continue the appointment. I took off that last dress and we went on our way, and we were 20 minutes before 5. So we were perfectly on her schedule, and kind of got out of her hair. But those are some red flags to look out for when you're just in general working with vendors. You don't want to feel uncomfortable. And if they make you feel uncomfortable, it's probably a good sign that you shouldn't be working with them. So that's just something to keep in mind that I wanted to share with you today as part of my wedding planning update. Okay, I want to talk about how to avoid hating your wedding photos, because I hear a lot that couples take their photos on their wedding day and they get them back and they don't like them. And there's maybe a few things that you can do to help prevent that from happening. I'm not saying it's never going to happen. It definitely can happen. It can also happen to me. But these are just some tips that I've gathered together to try and attempt to not hate them as much as possible. So, number 1 is honestly to take a picture of yourself in your wedding dress before you buy it, so you can see how it photographs. A lot of wedding dress stores, unfortunately, don't let you take photos, so this becomes hard. But the ones that do, if they let you take a picture, it is literally night and day sometimes from seeing it on you in a mirror versus seeing it on camera. I saw myself in some dresses that my sister took some pictures of me on camera after, and that I liked in person, and thought, I'm so glad I didn't pull the trigger on this dress because I did not like how it looked in the picture. It could have been a bad picture, but ultimately I was looking at the dress itself. Did it photograph well or not? And if it didn't, then it was an automatic no for me. So that's tip number 1. Like, take pictures of yourself in your dress before you buy it to make sure you actually like how you look in the pictures. It's so important. Number 2 is to practice your makeup, and again, look at them in pictures. So I know a lot of us have, makeup artists, and it's hard to practice like the makeup beforehand. But if you do a trial, for example, definitely take pictures of your makeup at the trial or after the trial so you can see how it photographs. If you don't like something in the photo, sometimes makeup looks different on camera again than it does in person. So it's another good tip for you there, to make sure you feel like yourself, and that when you look at yourself, you don't feel like it doesn't look like you. So that's another tip for you that I also did at my trial. I took pictures of myself to make sure I felt like myself. And then a sub tip here would be to maybe ask for as neutral makeup as possible, maybe avoiding like big pops of colors, like, blue eyeliner, or maybe like avoiding like red lips and just like really big colors, unless you're used to seeing yourself in those pops of colors and you want to add that to your wedding makeup. I would probably steer away. By the same token here, with the makeup, you also want to photograph your hair. So if you do a hair trial, make sure you take pictures of your hair to see how it photographs. Again, super important. Sometimes when you look at yourself from one angle versus like in a picture, it can look different, and you don't want to feel like it didn't look like how you thought it looked on the wedding day. because by then it's too late to change. So make sure you take pictures of your makeup, your hair, and your dress well before the big day. The next tip is to work with your photographer before your wedding day. If you have the opportunity to do an engagement shoot or just a shoot in general with your photographer to get a feel for how they work, it can make working with your photographer 10 times easier come the wedding day, and you can feel a lot more comfortable with them come the wedding day. See, you can look at the engagement shoot as like a trial run with your photographer. And it just makes everything more easy when you already know how they work. You can understand the flow better for the wedding day. You can kind of predict a little bit more easily what's going to happen with the photographer on the wedding day. So I really do urge you to work with your photographer well before your wedding day. It could really make or break how comfortable you feel with them on the big day. In tandem with this, also look at the editing style of your photographer with your pictures. This you'll only see after you do one shoot with them. So you know how they edit, and they can also understand your style before the wedding day, so that come your wedding pictures, you're not going back and forth 10,000 times asking them for different types of edits if you don't like them. The next tip is to practice taking pictures with your partner. You can do this before your engagement shoot, for example. You and your partner can take a couple pictures together just at home, just to practice like posing together. And then come the engagement shoot, you should be even more comfortable posing with your partner. And then of course, come the wedding, you should be extra comfortable posing with your partner in front of the camera. Of course, you're going to be comfortable with your partner in general, but sometimes when a camera is added, it makes people uncomfortable and it makes them feel and act differently. So really easing into it is key, and practicing your posing could actually really help with that. The last tip, if you struggle to like pose, ask somebody in your life who you know just knows how to pose in front of the camera to come guide you and help you. To give you an example, my sister knows how to pose in front of a camera so well. It just comes naturally to her. She just knows how to position her body to make it super flattering on camera. So sometimes her and I will kind of like, I'll ask her for advice on how to pose for a picture, and she'll like kind of guide me on how to do so. So if I'm come to practice my posing with my fiance, I'll probably have her kind of guide us how to pose, so that we have an easier time come the engagement shoot, and then again an easier time come the wedding day. Those are all of my tips for you on how to make sure your wedding photos turn out amazing, and to try and avoid hating your wedding photos as much as possible. If you have any additional tips and you're a photographer, feel free to comment them in the description box below. Or you're a couple that ended up loving their pictures, would love to hear what you did differently to ensure that you had pictures that you really, really loved that we obviously didn't mention on our episode today. All right, we have a listener story for you. It goes like this: the messiest wedding I've ever been to. Here we go. Last year, I got an unexpected wedding invitation from an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. We weren't particularly close anymore, but the wedding was local and curiosity got the best of me. I thought it might be a sweet opportunity to reconnect, maybe even catch up with old faces I hadn't seen in forever. The invitation said it was a child-free wedding, aside from the bride and groom's own kids. Perfect. We have 2 little ones, but I was more than happy to get a date night. We lined up a babysitter and made a plan. When we arrived, I was immediately thrown off. There were kids everywhere, not just the bride and groom's kids, like everyone brought their kids. Still, no hard feelings. We knew our toddlers would have melted down by now anyway, so it wasn't a huge deal. What did get under my skin was how unchecked the kids were. They were literally running wild, darting between guests while parents shrugged and sipped champagne. Then the ceremony began. It was supposed to be unplugged, but the woman in front of us didn't get the memo. Not only was her phone out, she stood in the aisle with it, blocking the photographer. The bridesmaids came wobbling down, visibly tipsy, and the maid of honor, already buzzed, had to break character mid-ceremony to snap at the woman with the phone. It was chaotic, and somehow still kind of beautiful. The real unraveling began at the reception. First, it became clear the bartenders had come stocked with booze and only booze. No water, no juice, not even soda. The father of the bride actually had to leave the reception and make a store run. By the time dinner rolled around, we were parched but ready for speeches. The best man delivered a genuinely heartfelt toast about how the bride had changed the groom's life for the better. It was the emotional peak of the night. And then came the maid of honor, stumbling, slurring, and absolutely plastered. She launched into what started as a sentimental story about growing up with the bride and spiraled into a 5-minute true crime monologue. I wish I was exaggerating. She described in detail all the self-defense techniques she'd learned and all the ways she could hypothetically, quote, make the groom disappear if he ever hurt her best friend. At one point, she slurred and said, and I'd get away with it too. Everyone was frozen. The bride, laughing hysterically. The groom and his family, staring in horror. Hours later, when we had to duck out to relieve the babysitter, we passed one of the bride's young children wandering the venue alone, crying. I gently asked her what was wrong, and she said she couldn't find her mom. So I went looking and eventually found the bride, outside, drunk, and laughing with friends. I let her know her daughter was upset and looking for her. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "She's not my responsibility tonight. She'll find someone else." I haven't spoken to the bride since, but I still find myself thinking about that night at least once a week. That's actually crazy. This is definitely the messiest wedding I've ever heard of or one of, aside from when my friend Amélie came on the podcast a few episodes back. I'll also link that episode below. And she talked about how she saw a food fight at a wedding. That's probably the craziest I've ever heard. But this story is a close second. If you've ever heard of a crazy story like this, please share it with us. We would love to read it here on the pod. You can email it at hello@weddingwednesdaypod.com. But in any case, let's read another listener story. It goes like this. Everyone was invited except his entire family. This happened 2 years ago at a family member's wedding. The couple were high school sweethearts and very young. The groom was still 20 at the time of the wedding, while the bride had just turned 21. He was literally a month away from being legal to drink, so a lot of us were confused about why they didn't just wait another few weeks. But still, everyone was happy for them until things started to feel off. It started small. The bride posted their save the dates on Instagram, gushing about how she loved the design. Her friends commented that they had received theirs and were so excited. But not a single person on the groom's side had gotten one. Not his brother, not his cousins, not even his aunt or uncle. I figured maybe they were just sent to people who wouldn't automatically assume they were invited. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. During their engagement, I was genuinely supportive. I'm a wedding planner, so I helped where I could, sharing planning tools, budget tracking apps, checklists, and little reminders brides often forget. I wanted to be helpful. Then, the groom's grandfather passed away. The funeral had been planned more than a month in advance, but the bride and groom didn't show up. When asked why, they said they had their engagement party the same day, and the bride had her dress appointment the day before. That rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. The funeral date had been known for weeks, and it would have been easy to move the party. To make it worse, no one on the groom's side had even been invited to the engagement party. That was when people really started getting suspicious. Then came the official wedding invitations. That's when we found out it was going to be a child-free event. The wedding was out of town, and many of us had kids, so a lot of people said they couldn't make it. It's hard enough finding a sitter. Flying with kids and not being allowed to bring them just made it impossible. Even then, most people were still trying to be understanding. But then we found out that the groom's brother hadn't been invited at all, and these two had always been best friends. That made no sense to anyone. Then came the final blow. Someone discovered that the child-free rule only applied to the groom's family. The bride's family and friends were allowed to bring their kids. Our side wasn't. The invites were literally different. People were shocked. It wasn't just rude, it felt cruel. At the rehearsal dinner, things got worse. The groom mentioned that he wished his brother could have been invited. He was sad that no one from his family was coming. The bride screamed at him, called him names that I cannot repeat, told him it was her day, and what she said goes. He ended up calling family members that night, crying and unsure what to do. We all told him the same thing. It's his wedding too, and the way she was acting was a huge red flag. Despite everything, they went through with it. Oh no. We heard after the wedding that the groom was still heartbroken his family wasn't there. He went quiet after that. Whenever someone texted him, the reply would come from her. Eventually, he stopped replying altogether. Since then, there have been family events, even funerals, that they have skipped. The only time she reaches out now is to talk poorly about someone in the family, or more recently, to share her baby registry. She made it clear that no one from our side would be invited to the baby shower either. No one really tries to reach out anymore. Now, as a wedding planner, I fully understand and support child-free weddings, but you have to be ready for people to say they cannot come. And that is okay. I've helped plan weddings where only the couple's children were allowed, or only the kids from close family. But what you cannot do is tell one side of the family they cannot bring kids while letting the other side do whatever they want. That is not about budgets or logistics. That is about control. And a wedding, no matter how beautiful, is never just about one person. It's supposed to be about both. This is so true. I mean, first of all, there were a lot of flags, if you ask me. The number one was they're so young. You know, getting married at 20 and 21, although it was legal and fine, it's young. Like you're still developing as an adult. It's really hard to make that kind of decision. You think you want one thing, but then you want another, like 10 years down the line. So that's one thing that is concerning to me, but maybe not, clearly not to them, and that's okay. But the real concerning thing is how she's been treating him and his side of the family. If the shoe was on the other foot and he was treating her and her side of the family that way, I don't think that would go over so well, clearly, and is kind of telling of what kind of marriage that he's probably going to have with her. So I'm really sad for this groom who couldn't have his family at his wedding, but sometimes things happen like that and there's not much that you can do about it. Let's read one more story for today before we close off. It goes, am I the asshole for not telling my parents that my arranged marriage is actually a love marriage? Let's read. I, 23 female, have been dating my neighbor, 25 male, since 10 years. Keep in mind, I live in a third world country, and in my culture, love marriages and girlfriend/boyfriend relationships are seen as a shame. My boyfriend's family is not like that, so they know about me from the beginning, and I have met them several times. But my family, on the other hand, for girls, it's a big fat no when it comes to dating, no matter if you're 18 plus or 20 plus. So I've been hiding this relationship since 10 years from them. Don't get me wrong. My family is understanding and gives me freedom. I can go whenever I want with my female friends, wear whatever I want, but it's just the boyfriend thing that's not allowed. Yes, I live with my parents at 23 because in my country, people live with their parents in their home no matter their age. It's not just my family actually where I live. It's a cultural thing that girls can't date. Last year when I turned 23, my family started looking for marriage options for me, arranging a marriage for me, but I couldn't do an arranged marriage as my boyfriend and I loved each other a lot. But I was scared shitless to tell my family that I have had a boyfriend all this time. I don't know, maybe they would have agreed. Maybe they would have been angry and then agreed. Because don't get me wrong, my parents do love me a lot and do everything possible to make me happy. But telling them that I have been keeping a boyfriend behind their back, lying to them to meet him, and I just didn't want them to think I broke their trust. So I made a plan. As my boyfriend and I were neighbors, our families knew each other. They were not friends or anything, but my parents knew my boyfriend's mother. So I asked my boyfriend's mother to tell my parents that she would like me to be her daughter-in-law. That way, my parents would think that it's an arranged marriage. Actually, it's a tradition here in arranged marriages that the guy's mother has to talk to the girl's parents if she wants their daughter's hand in marriage for her son. So my boyfriend's mother did just that. And trust me, I was so nervous about what my parents would say. If they would say no, then what? Then I would have had to tell them the truth. This thought alone was enough to take my anxiety through the roof. But thankfully, my family actually really liked the proposal and agreed. We had an engagement a few months back and we were set to marry this year. I am super happy. Happiest I have ever been to marry the love of my life, which I prayed for since 10 years. But often I feel a bit guilty about lying to my family. So am I the asshole for not telling my parents that my arranged marriage is actually a love marriage? Hold on, there's a PS. P.S. People are saying my parents might know. I think that's highly unlikely because I never got caught They didn't even have a single hint that I could ever date. I never gave them any reason to be suspicious. They actually agreed so easily because my fiance have been treating my father with special attention since years whenever they meet outside the house. Also, he has been bringing food, sweets on special occasions and festivals. He did everything possible to impress my father and his family, to have a good reputation in the neighborhood, so my parents would agree because they knew he'd be a good person, and family also has a good reputation. Let's see what people are saying. Not the asshole. You do what you have to do. Somebody else said, tell no one. This is harmless, and right now everyone is happy. Leave it be. Somebody else said, there are different reasons for lying. You are lying by not telling the complete truth to keep everyone happy. That is not a problem. I wish you years of happiness. Most people are saying she's not the asshole. I totally agree. I don't think she's the asshole. I'm actually so happy that this ended up being a happy ending for her. Obviously, because if her parents had said no to the hand in marriage, that would have been really, really upsetting for her, I'm sure. But definitely not the asshole. Would love to hear your thoughts on this story too. If you have any crazy wedding horror stories, feel free to email it at hello@weddingwednesdaypod.com. Of course, rate, review, subscribe, do all the things because it really does help our podcast grow. And with that, I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.